Hello, and welcome to Steve's Mixtapes. The appearance of this week's guest mixer rather neatly completes a little circle of links. To explain, as long-time listeners may recall, my very first guest was Ian Forth of the marvellous Sombrero Fallout, a show on which I appeared myself back in October 24. About a year after that, Ian's old friends Paul and Tony, by this time running their own podcast, Twilight Turntable, also guest-hosted Sombrero Fallout. Now, Ian's been on Twilight Turntable talking about the Human League's Dare, and you might remember I've recently appeared on the same show discussing the Isley Brothers. And also, about 3 months ago, Paul from Twilight Turntable was a guest on this show. So to complete this slightly incestuous web of podcasting, I'm delighted to welcome onto Steve's Mixtapes, Tony Harris.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me, Steve.
So we've completed the, what is it, Pentagon? I don't know what it is, but it feels like a neat little tying up of things.
It feels like I'm bringing up the rear. So I'm very happy about
that. So for any listeners, I mean, I have spoken about Twilight Turntable and I've plugged it a little bit for you. But if anybody hasn't heard of it and hasn't listened to it yet, and I hope yet is the operative word, do you want to tell us a little bit about it? Because it's an interesting basis for a podcast, I think.
Sure. Thank you very much. I have a late night listening habit. I believe that people have sort of forgotten how to listen to things, listen to music. They tend to use it as a soundtrack to other things that they like to do. So if they're cooking or they're reading or they're even, heaven forfend, watching TV or something, they will play music and it'll sort of be a background thing. And I felt that we'd sort of lost the art of sitting down and just appreciating a piece of music, particularly an album. And I remembered as a kid, if I went out and bought a new piece of music, I didn't leave my bedroom till I sort of knew it all word for word. So every night before I go to bed, I decide to not watch that last episode of some binge box set, and instead we'll play an album, both sides, and I will just have the sleeve notes and cover for company. And I was talking to Paul, who's an old friend of mine, and we sort of correspond on music quite a lot. And he had been doing a podcast with a friend of his who sadly died, a friend of ours, sadly, who died, called Pat Donahue. And it was a sort of humorous, comedic, I wouldn't even know, a sort of a melange, is probably a good word for it, of their observations on life. And I know Paul was keen to do something else. I said, well, I'd had this idea of why don't we kind of re-explore albums? And the idea that we use, the conceit we have, is that Paul is sort of like the Sorcerer's Apprentice. And I find albums and records that I think he will be less familiar with in his collection. And I set him homework every sort of week or so, and off he goes and listens to it. And then he comes back and basically we just have a chat about it, like two old fellas in a pub, which actually is by and large what we were doing anyway. And it's proved quite interesting because Paul is like a sponge for these things. He loves finding out new things. And because I like listening so much, I have quite an extensive record collection. There's nothing I like more than pulling something out to sort of see what he makes of it. So that's basically how it works. And then once in a while, and in fact for anybody who decides to drop into episode 30, the tables get turned and they become very uncomfortable as Paul decides to set me some homework. We still go on about the pain I had having to listen to Radiohead, which is something he absolutely adores. And I think the best way to describe it is I found it less adorable. Okay. But that's basically what we do, is that we sit and chat about an album. And often I fill in kind of what it was like at the time. So there's all these sort of references to, Top of the Pops or Old Grey Whistle Test or the Record Mirror or the Tube or going to see them live at Newcastle City Hall or something like that. And sort of try and fill it in with kind of what goes on was going on around the time of the release, or around the time that I fell in love with the record, or first heard the record, or who recommended it to me. And we go down all sorts of odd highways and byways, including why men don't wear hats anymore, or how Germany entered World War One, and all sorts of strange sort of additions to what we do. So um, we are very grateful to anybody who listens, particularly you, Steve. And we really like it when we have guests on, and we had a lot of very positive feedback when Ian came on to discuss the Human League, and then when you came on with the Isley Brothers, and it's a bit of fun, and it's interesting for me because I live abroad, so it's a way for me to stay in touch with Paul actually fairly regularly. We have status meetings to discuss our artworks and briefings and production, and it's been great. So thank you to all of you who have listened. I welcome any of you who haven't, and I'm looking forward to this challenge because this is a format that I absolutely adore. So we're both a little bit, Paul and I are both a little bit jealous of it.
Okay, okay. Well, I mean, I'm a little bit jealous of Ian because what I really wanted to do originally was exactly what he does, which is the themes mixes idea. But
Ah,
he stole that and did it. In his inimitable fashion, still going strong, 200 odd episodes in. But I would highly recommend the Twilight Turntable. I would also say to listeners, the ones you can find where Paul likes the album a little less than Tony tend to be the most entertaining ones.
yes,
Donald
yes, they are.
Fagen was a particularly good one. But yeah, the last one I listened to was Kate Bush, Never Forever. And I'm very dutiful. I listen to the album first. I won't listen to one until I've listened to the album. And really enjoyed it. Would recommend it to anybody. Now, you mentioned knowing Paul and I think Ian through work. Now, you work in advertising, and Google
We
is a
do.
marvelous thing, isn't it? So I discovered if you go to the marketingsociety.com/Tony Harris, you discover that you were in 2010 voted one of London's top 10 account men by Campaign magazine. That must have been quite an honour.
It was a bit of a surprise, but yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, I don't really. I do consultancy work in advertising now, rather than sort of work for an agency. But Ian and Paul and I all met at the same place around the mid 90s. I had been at a different agency and had joined this one where I met Ian, and we worked together straight away and got on. We had a lot of the same interests. And then Paul was a trainee, and he came as a trainee, this sort of very good looking, handsome, much loved by everybody, young trainee who joined. And he came to work on my team. And we were just sort of, we found that we had quite a lot in common. We liked football, we liked music, and we liked sort of daft comedy. We used to sit and watch reruns of Harry Hill quite a lot, and Shooting Stars and all that sort of thing. So it cast your mind back to sort of 96, 97. That's kind of what we're doing, and that's how we all met, and we keep in touch, and it's been and weirdly we sort of all ended up sort of doing podcasts.
Well, I think everyone's making one these days, aren't they?
Yeah.
But your work took you to Manila, and I happen to know as well that you've published a book about your experiences in Manila called "Advertising More Fun in the Philippines," which you were nominated for the Philippines National Book Award in 2015.
Uh, Once you really have done your homework.
Oh, I have.
Yeah, I had never been to the Philippines before, and I got to a stage. I was about 45, I think. Most people tend to sort of do their expat duties much earlier,
Hmm.
and much later, I kind of had just decided I wanted to try something else and wanted to go abroad. And it hadn't happened. And for about 5 years, I'd been kind of waiting for an opportunity. It didn't come. And then somebody rang me up one day and said, "What do you know about the Philippines?" And I said, "I hear they're a lovely couple." Um, and I went out for 72 hours, met my person who'd then become my creative partner, met the team, and decided, go on then, I'll give it a go. So I sold my house and my car, left my friends and my family, and went to live in Manila. And within about 2 months, a big pitch came up, which was for the tourism campaign for the country.
That's where the title of the book comes from.
Yeah, it's more fun in the Philippines was the tagline that the campaign we eventually presented. But it's a much we kind of don't even think about the tourism campaign in the UK or what it might be, but it's a really big deal in the Philippines. It's almost like a sort of country branding campaign, and they want people to feel proud of it. And so, as I am learning about this completely new and very different environment in which I've gone to live, I'm almost a bit like a tourist. So the book was about my first 7 months till we kind of, as we developed the campaign, and then we did also say that I ended up having to present it to the then president.
Shall we move on to the music itself, Tony? You'll hit the ground running track. Now, I wasn't surprised in the slightest to see this artist pop up because when you and Paul appeared on Sombrero Fallout, you talked about your love of this artist. And I think this in some ways is quite an important song to you, am I right?
It is. This song brought Paul and I together, really. I'd heard it on the radio, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know the Divine Comedy. I'd never heard them. And I remember being in the office and going, "Oh, does anybody know that song? I've heard something in the woodshed." And Paul said, "Oh, no, it's called Something for the Weekend." I thought, "Oh, great." I said, thanks. I said, do you like it? He says, "I think it's terrific." And he had been a big Divine Comedy fan. And he said, "Oh, it's terrific." But he didn't tell me it was a Divine Comedy. He just said it's called Something for the Weekend. So I go out and buy Something for the Weekend. But in actual fact, 2 weeks after that had first been released as the single, there was a song called Something for the Weekend, which used four, the number four for four, which was released by the Super Furry Animals.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
from down there in Welsh Wales, which actually is a great record. But I went and bought that instead because he hadn't told me what the band was. And I said, "I've got this record. It doesn't sound anything like the Woodshed song." And then he put me right with Divine Comedy. So it's the song that brought us together musically. And here we are, crikey, now 20, nearly 30 years later, and we're still banging on about records together.
Something in the woodshed, and I can hear it breathing. It's such an eerie feeling, darling. He said, "There's nothing in the woodshed. It's your imagination and of the conversation, darling." Something in his heart told him to come clean. He wasn't what he claimed to be. Something in his dreams told him to pretend it was something for
Something for the Weekend by Divine Comedy from the 1996 album Casanova. They hit the ground running. Choice of my guest this week, Tony Harris. I think Divine Comedy are a great and somewhat underrated band, I would say. I'm particularly fond. I mean, a lot of people know and rate the singles. Yeah, they're like this, they're like National Express and all those things. I think the Regeneration album is a fantastic one.
Yeah.
That doesn't get nearly enough plays by people. And in fact, every time somebody mentions Divine Comedy, I go off and play that, which I'll probably do later this evening. But there we go.
Paul will be delighted.
Yes, he will. And just to say, I have pinged an email off to Neil Hannon's agent or his PR company or whatever with the hope of getting him on here. So watch this space. I don't hold out huge amounts of hope, but you never know. I didn't expect to have Thurston Moore on here, and he turned up. So there you go. Right, usual mixer question, Tony. And this is an interesting one given what you present a podcast about. So the question is usually, have you always been somebody who has enjoyed making mixtapes, etc.? So obviously you're a big believer in listening to whole albums, but have you any space in your life for making compilations as well?
I certainly used to a lot. I mean, a lot, because I long before I sort of decided to pursue the long playing format to talk about. I mean, I love singles. I love 45s. I used to collect jukeboxes, which are, if you can ever get hold of an original jukebox, is fantastic. And I searched the world to get the right singles to go in it. And I loved all of that. So in effect, that was like a very, very large mixtape of sort of 100 singles that I used to like to do. But in the old days, I also used to like, and in fact, it's where I was working with Paul, was with Sony. And we worked on the mini disc format, which was the greatest format for compilations. And
you say that because I interviewed last night John Sutton, who is actually going to be, by a quirk of chronology, going to be next week's guest. And he was a huge fan of mini discs and still has a huge stack of them in his garage, apparently. And is quite evangelical about them. I don't think I've ever even seen one up close, to be honest.
They were fantastic. If you liked making compilations, they were fantastic. And I loved making compilations. And I had lots of rules about them. And I used to try and theme them. And, you know, and I absolutely was... I was one of those sort of compilation zealots, as I'm sure you are. You know, this is why I love this, because it's very, I mean, I wouldn't, one of the things, you know, a rule, you can't have two of the same artist on the same compilation. You know, that's possibly on another side of a cassette, but ideally they shouldn't be anywhere on that C90.
Unless you're doing something thematic, where the same artist maybe appears 4 or 5 times, but there's something that links the other songs in between them.
Okay.
You see,
I would have been far more totalitarian about it, but there you go.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll move on to your something old choice, Tony. So there's been many people over the years been described as the fifth Beatle. But in many ways, this guy possibly deserved the title more than most. In fact, the single Get Back was credited as The Beatles with Billy Preston. So I didn't know this song in particular, but it's great. I'm not much of a one for dancing, but even this had me sort of tempted to move around the room a little bit. So the song is called Will It Go Round in Circles? Why this one?
Well, this is one from the jukebox. This is one of those I tracked down on the jukebox. I love it. I mean, Billy Preston is one of those fantastic people who has played with everybody. You know,
yes.
He is credited with the Beatles, but he's on a lot of the Stones' best albums of the sort of late 60s, early 70s. He's played with Elton John. He's on Barbra Streisand albums, Eric Clapton, even Johnny Cash. He's on all of them. This wasn't a hit in the UK. It was a number one single in the US. He had another number one single called Nothing from Nothing around this time. There is a fantastic clip on YouTube of him playing this on Midnight Special. And the reason I say it is not because he has the biggest afro you've probably ever seen, but the drummer has the highest cymbals I've ever seen on a drum kit. They are so high. I don't know if it's the angle, but it looks absolutely enormous. But it is a great, funky, shuffling song. It's fabulous.
I've got a song, I ain't got no melody. friends. I've got a song, I ain't got no melody. I'm gonna sing it to my friends. When I go round in circles, when they fly high like a bird up in the sky. When I go round in circles, when they fly high like a bird up in the sky. I've got a story, ain't got no moral. Let the bad guy win every once in a while. I've got a story, ain't got no moral. Let the bad guy win every once in a while. When they go round in circles, when they fly high like a bird up in the sky. When they go round in circles, when they fly high like a bird up in the sky. I gotta dance, ain't got no steps, no. I'm gonna let the music move me around. I've got to dance, I ain't got no steps. I'm gonna let the music move me around. When I go round in circles, when it fly high like a bird up in the sky. When I go round in circles, when it fly high like a bird up in the sky. Fly high like a bird up in the sky. I've got a song, I ain't got no melody. I'm gonna sing it to my friends. I've got a song, I ain't got no melody. I'm gonna sing it to my friend. When I go round and circle, fly high like a bird up in the sky. Ooh. When it fly high like a bird up in the sky. When it go round in circles. When it fly high like a bird up in the sky. Go round in circles. When it fly high like a bird up in the sky. When it go round in circles. When it fly high like a bird up in the sky. Woo!
Billy Preston from 1972. The album was Music Is My Life, and that was Will It Go Round in Circles. And if I can find that midnight special video, I shall certainly drop a link to it on the webpage at stevesmixtape.com. Now, Tony, you're probably aware that before we get to the something new choice, I normally ask people about what they do in this day and age of 10 million songs coming out every day to try and keep up. And I will get to that question, but I just wanted to ask you something else first. Am I right in thinking there's a family connection with your selection here?
Yes, it is. I'm afraid there is a little bit of nepotism with this one.
No, well, there's nothing wrong with that. I had Buggy Jive on, also known as Brian Thompson today, who chose his own recent single. So, you know, if he can choose his own song, you can choose a relative. I seem to remember vaguely that you might have mentioned this on an episode of Twilight Turntable. Is Is this like a niece or something?
These are my twin nieces, Danny
Yeah.
and Zara. They are signed to Ireland, and they have very high hopes for them. They're about to go off on a European tour. They have been playing music since they were very, very small, and they're really very young, and they got picked up by some management. They love the Beatles, they love the Eagles, they play guitar and keys, and they write incredibly empathetic songs. They are starting to build quite a fan base. They were featured on Radio 1 Future Pop this week. They're interviewed on there. We're all very excited about it.
And very, very proud, no doubt.
And very proud. And they're doing a sort of series of Q&As. They sort of do a sort of 40-minute set, and then their fans come and ask them questions and bring them chocolates and all this sort of thing. And it's very, they found one who'd actually had some of their lyrics tattooed already to them. So it's,
Oh, wow.
we think, we're very hopeful they're going to be very big. They've just released a new single called Bone Structure, which is going to be on their second EP. But the song I've chosen for this is off the first EP, called the Motive EP, and the song's called Sleeping Dogs. And I confess it is my nieces, Danny and Zara, but irrespective, I think this is terrific.
And it is. I really like it. How old are they?
22.
Wow. Yeah, it's
They-
very mature stuff for 22.
Well, they write with a maturity that they simply do not exhibit as human beings, which
Sinking like a dead weight in a hotel swimming pool. You left the house and took the car and left a note in our room. When you vanish, I stay like a child by the window, waiting for you to come in and swear that you changed. Days fade through tonight. Take off my clothes, body side by side. Now the bed sheets feel like snow. Oh God, I think it's fatal. We scream across the table. Why turn the water into fire when you're the heart I cradle? The stitches come undone. I'm lying there already torn, but this time I won't let the sleeping dog slide. It's giving me a migraine, 'cause you're twisting round my head like an acrobat. You're spinning further out of control. Don't think you're malicious, think it's just the way that you're wired. But I'm dying to fix you. Days fade through tonight. Take off my clothes, body side by side. Now the bed sheets feel like snow. Oh God, I think it's fatal. We scream across the table. Why turn the water into fire when you're the heart I cradle? The stitches come undone and lying bare already torn. But this time I won't let the sleeping dogs lie. Since when did bullets shoot from the mouth of an angel? I'm bleeding out, you're in hysterics, we're unstable. Shells on the floor, neighbors listen through the walls. And if she had to pick a side, I'm always nicer when she calls. Time and again, I hold on to you so tight. You pierce the skin, now my knuckles burning white. I thought we had it to a science, I thought we had it all. Turns out I won't let the sleeping dogs lie. Oh God, I think it's fatal. We scream across the table. Why turn the water into fire when you're the heart I cradle? The stitches come undone. I'm lying bare already torn, but this time I won't let the sleeping dogs. Oh God, I think it's fatal. We scream across the table. Why turn the water into fire when you're the heart I cradle? The stitches come undone.
Dolder with Sleeping Dogs, a 2026 release, and we look forward to hearing more from them as their career progresses. I can't believe they're only 22. Hadn't created anything so mature or creative when I was 22, when I was mainly in the pub. But anyway, let's not go there.
Well, we're very proud of them, so we wish
I
them
can
well.
imagine so, and quite rightly too. So before we get to the something borrowed, I will ask you the usual question, right? How do you endeavour to keep up with contemporary music that might interest you, given that there is such a ridiculous amount of it these days?
Okay, it's confession time.
Okay.
I don't.
I kind of had a feeling you were going to say that.
I really don't, unless it's an artist that I have some residual connection with. Then I'll go and if I hear they've got something new. I've actually. It started. I was very, very good at this until I left the country in 2011. I used to keep up with everything. I was still a chart watcher, and I was really interested in new music. Then when I first went to the Philippines, I just didn't hear anything. There's no there wasn't a sort of radio culture where you would kind of hear new things, and obviously very little was released there that wasn't sort of pop, dance, techno, whatever it was, and that wasn't really what I was terribly interested in. So there are all sorts of people, and I'll be honest, if Ed Sheeran came along and bit me on the knee, I wouldn't know it was Ed Sheeran really, which in days gone by I would have done.
Funnily enough, we've had an Ed Sheeran song on here. My mum chose one. Oh God, it was the one he sang with the blind opera guy. What's he called? Something Bocelli.
Oh, Andrea Bocelli, yeah.
That's him, yeah, something with him. And that was the third ever Ed Sheeran song I've ever knowingly heard in my life. But I'm at the stage now where they announced the Glastonbury headliners on the Pyramid stage, and I won't have even heard of half of them.
But what I will say is that one of the things that happened when I went abroad was it made me delve much deeper and open up into a lot more legacy artists that perhaps I would never. So I am listening to new music. It just happens to be old music. Yes. So there were all sorts of things that I'd not really had time for, or not really. Not when I say not had time for, not that I didn't like, but I hadn't got time to sort of engage with them. So I spent a lot of time doing that, particularly when I went and lived in Tokyo.
Something Borrowed sees the third appearance on the show of Aretha Franklin. Until You Come Back to Me wasn't the song I knew well. I think I have heard it before. I didn't know well. Why particularly this? I mean, obvious why you might choose Aretha Franklin, but why particularly this one? Well,
this is written by Stevie Wonder when he was about 16 years old. We talked about my nieces being prodigies. Yeah. Well, this guy really set the benchmark for it. And he wrote it in 1967 and recorded it, and then it was never released until about 10 years later on an anthology. So it never really appeared. And he had this song and he gave it to her. And there's a great clip again on YouTube of them playing it together, if you ever look for that. But honestly, nobody does romance like Stevie Wonder. I mean, thwarted or otherwise. And he can just very simply make you feel joyful. Put Aretha Franklin's voice on top of it, and it just becomes something astonishing for me. So this is really one of my favorite singles ever. And it's another one on the jukebox.
Something Blue is always an interesting choice, Johnny, because people have a bit of leeway with this, because people can just do blues music, they can go for something that's really sad and melancholy, or just with something blue in the title. Now, your Something Blue choice couldn't be more of a contrast with the preceding track, really. And in fact, it's quite an earnest song in lots of ways, isn't it?
Very much so. And I apologize for those of you listening. It's about 8 minutes long, but I find it's 8 minutes long, but it's a song that's really, really riveting. I like songs that tell stories. I like songs that have a context to them. I quite enjoy that. Mike Scott of the Waterboys, who this is, does that a lot in his songs. Even if you listen to his latest album, Life, Death, and Dennis Hopper, it's basically all about scenes from Dennis Hopper's life. I mean, it's a really interesting piece of work. But this is one of his very early songs. I think it's from A Pagan Place, which, funnily enough, when I was on Sombrero Fallout, I chose another song from Pagan Place, Someone Might Wave Back. So clearly this is an album that I'm now starting to realise is probably more important to me than I actually realised, because I keep coming back to it. But this is an incredible sort of epic tale of a young Russian soldier who takes part in the Battle of Berlin, meets the Americans at the Elbe. You might have seen the famous photos of the Russians and the Americans meeting when they've defeated the Germans, and then is sent back by Stalin to the Gulag because he believes they've all had too much Western influence. It just has a landscape and a platform that I just find so beguiling that I can sit with it the full time. And when you see it live, it is even more riveting as a song. So this is the Waterboys and Red Army Blues.
When I left my home and my family, my mother said to me, son, it's not how many Germans you kill that counts, it's how many people you set free. So I packed my bags, brushed my cap, walked out into the world. 17 years old, never kissed a girl. Took a train to Voronezh, that was as far as it would go. Changed my sacks for a uniform, bit my lip against the snow. I prayed for Mother Russia in the summer of 43. And as it drove the Germans back, I really believed that God was listening to me. Then we howled into Berlin, tore the smoking buildings down, raised the red flag high. orders. Went to Stettiner for the train. Kiev, said the commissar. From there, your own way home. And I never got to Kiev. We never came back home. Train went north to the Tiger. We're stripped and marched in fire up the great Siberian road. For miles and miles and miles and miles, dressed in stripes and tatters, in a gulag, left to die. All because Comrade Stalin was scared that we'd become too westernized. Used to love my country. Used to be so young. Used to believe that life was the best song ever sung. I would have died for my country in 1945. But now only one thing remains. 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 The brute will to survive.
From the 1984 album A Pagan Place, that was the Waterboys with Red Army Blues, the quite epic Something Blue choice of my guest this week, Tony Harris. And interestingly, following on from Something Blue, you've gone for one of the most famous bluesmen of all, but perhaps not his most straightforwardly bluesy album. I didn't know this. And as you may know from listening to previous shows, when I first listen to these lists, I try to listen without context. I try to stick it on and not look anything up. I was aware it was Johnny Hooker, and I thought, that sounds a little bit like Santana in places. And there's a very good reason for that, isn't there?
It is John Lee Hooker backed by the Carlos Santana band. And this is The Healer, a song that, frankly, I would love to have played at my funeral. He went away. He was trying to reactivate him, John Lee Hooker. I mean, by this stage, he's quite an age.
And he was 73 when this came out.
Yeah, and he made a duets album, so they brought in a lot of people to do songs with him on this album. So he does a great number with Bonnie Raitt. He does something with George Thorogood, Robert Cray. So it's kind of the next generation of sort of blues artists of the sort of late 80s. And Carlos Santana, who also himself in 1989 didn't feel particularly current. But the guitar work on this is off the scale good. And they actually go away and I nearly played this instead, which is in 95, they kind of do it again on a song called Chill Out, Things Gonna Change. But this this is spiritual and it's moving, and it's just got such an unusual vibe to it, with John Lee Hooker's really gravelly blues voice and this sort of Latin loop that is almost there, sort of on the keys, and then Carlos Santana's guitar sort of searing in is interesting. And of course, he would go on and do the same thing for his own career 10 years later when he does that Supernatural album.
I've seen Santana live. I saw them in 1984 supporting Bob Dylan. So I went to St James's Park. I've recounted this story on previous episodes. To see Bob Dylan. I went with my dad because none of my friends and contemporaries were interested in anything other than, you know, Adam and the Ants or whatever was in the chart at the time. So it was the bill was Bob Dylan, Santana, and Lindisfarne. My dad went with me. He was, as I've said before, terribly excited all day simply because he was standing on the hallowed turf of St James's Park, which was very
rightly
exciting
so
for him for reasons that you would understand. Lindisfarne were brilliant. Santana, I loved the first 20 minutes or so, and I thought he was the most incredible guitar player. But they had this huge band. I mean, there must have been 14, 15 of them, including either 2, possibly even 3 drummers and 4 percussionists. You know, lots of congas and all the rest of it. And every one of them got a solo. And when you're on to your, you know, I can live with 1 drum solo, but when you're on to your 6th or 7th, it's a bit much. But there we go. Anyway, so let's hear it now. This is John Lee Hooker with Santana and The Healer. on to Around the World. So we're off to France, sort of via Tunisia. This is Jacqueline Tayeb, who I wasn't familiar with, but I love this. I love this song. I didn't know it.
good.
It is one of the most 60s songs I've ever heard in my life, and it's a yeah song, isn't it? So
It's a yeah song. I love yeah yeah. I
Yeah.
absolutely love it.
I can't believe I said yeah in response to that.
I love it. I love Françoise Hardy. I love France Gall, who's my favourite of them.
For
And,
anybody who's not familiar with the genre, do you want to sort of explain what it is?
well, I don't know if you remember, there used to the sketch show, not the 9 o'clock news, used to have a song about why can't the French rock and roll or something. They were very everybody's always been very disparaging of the French and their attempts at pop music. But in the 60s, they had an incredible scene which tended to be these sort of young pop starlets, normally in their teens, normally with rather slightly sinister Svengalis, often Serge Gainsbourg, it has to be said, who could write these sort of really incredible sort of upbeat pop 60s. They all feel like everybody's twisting and whatever it is to them. I think, and this song, 7 heures du matin, is classified as freak beat, and it's an astonishing record. She did go on and have a couple of other songs like Bonjour Brazil and stuff like that, but she's not one of the big stars of Yeah Yeah. But this,
she was only 19, I think, when this came out, wasn't she?
yeah, but this is, I think, one of the best singles of that time, and it just sounds, you want to be in at whatever party this is playing. I should say there is an English language version of it. It was released about 3 years later, but
okay, I didn't know that. No.
it's sort of more interesting as the story of a bored teenager sort of fantasizing about The Who and Paul McCartney. And
She wants Paul McCartney to come and help her finish her homework off.
yeah, it's just a terrifically funny and upbeat and exciting song. As I say, it's another one on the jukebox.
Il est 7 heures du matin, faut se réveiller. Oh, j'ai sommeil. Bon alors, un peu de musique pour se mettre en train. Je sais pas moi, quelque chose comme Talking about my generation. Ouais, c'est pas tout à fait ça. Je trouve plus ma brosse à dents. Quelle passée celle-là encore. La bleue est à mon père, la rouge est à ma mère, la jaune est à mon frère. Vous avez pas vu ma brosse à dents? Tiens, on est lundi aujourd'hui. Ah, pour demain, j'ai un devoir d'anglais. J'aimerais bien avoir Paul McCartney pour m'aider. J'ai envie de mettre un disque pour embêter les voisins qui roupillent toute la journée. Quelque chose comme un bon Elvis Presley. Oh mais c'est vrai, celui-là il en est resté. Un peu d'eau sur la figure pour me réveiller. Le dodo c'est terminé. Je suis presque prête et ça va beaucoup mieux. Je mets mon Shetland rouge ou bien mon Shetland bleu? Mon Shetland rouge? Mon Shetland bleu? Mon Shetland bleu? Mon Shetland rouge? Non, mon Shetland bleu? Mon Shetland rouge? Le bleu? Le bleu? Le rouge? Mon Shetland rouge?
Jacqueline Tayeb there with 7 heures du matin, a single from 1967, a classic bit of Yeah Yeah. Right, your left of centre choice is an interesting one because when I was doing my first listen through and writing notes down, I wrote 60 Spy Series because this does sound like it could be the theme music from, something about a mysterious guy with a very thin tie.
Yeah.
You know the sort of thing I mean, but it's
Yeah.
not because it's from the late 90s. And it is from the original soundtrack of a film called Cowboy Bebop, which I was not familiar with, which is a Japanese neo-noir space western anime TV series.
It is, with characters like Jet Black, who is not the drummer in the Stranglers,
No.
and Spider and Faye Valentine. This I heard when I was in Japan. I think it's phenomenal. It's so exciting, this music. I mean, it does sound like a spy thing from the 60s, except it sort of has more swell and drama
Yeah.
in it already. It's an enormously exciting piece of music, and I just thought, well, why don't we put that down? I love it. It's and if you ever want to see it performed, there is a great version which they did during the pandemic, where they were all doing it individually in their little
Oh, okay,
studios,
yeah.
and you can imagine there's quite a lot of them there. And this is just a tremendously exciting piece of work, which, for reasons I have no idea, is called Tank.
I think it's time to blow this scene. Get everybody in the stuff together. Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
On to your wild card, Tony. Now, I know you are a big Rolling Stones man, so you had a wealth of songs to choose from. I have to say, I'm a bit hit and miss with the Stones. From the 70s onwards, I'm not quite so fussed. Late 60s stuff I'll go for. And in fact, I would say this is probably, if I had to pick a Stones album that I know well, it would probably be this one. It's the same age as me, recorded and released the year I was born. And the interesting fact about this album, of course, is that the front cover was designed by Delia Smith.
It was indeed, yes.
Great piece of pop trivia, that. So, so it's Let It Bleed we're talking about, obviously. But you've not gone for one of the more famous songs on it.
No, look, I couldn't get through this without playing some Rolling Stones. They are they are my favourite band. I've seen them more times than really is healthy. But I love them, and I thought, well, I was looking for kind of a deeper cut to play. This album has so many good songs on it. Gimme Shelter's on this. You Can't Always Get What You Want is on this. Love in Vain is on this. Let It Bleed itself is on this. Midnight Rambler. And yet, this is a song that I think is terrific. The Stones, when they sound really loose, you know that they're not loose. They actually are one of the tightest bands there is. And to sound that loose, you've got to work really hard to do it. And I think this is where they're really starting to find a sort of more sinewy, funky way of playing. And I just find this, again, I've seen them do this live only once, but it absolutely was one of those that made me sit up and take notice. They're a band that mean an awful lot to me in everything. I believe there is a new album due out any minute now, which I'm quite excited about.
How many is that?
Officially, I think, is it 28 or something? I think
Oh,
it's not as many as you think.
still haven't managed as many as the 4 then.
No. This is when I think they are playing at their absolute best. Between 68, Beggar's Banquet, Let It Bleed, Sticky Fingers, an album that incidentally Billy Preston plays on as well, and some later ones. But Monkey Man is a really enjoyable, classic bit of Stones grime and grit.
I'm a flea between that monkey. All my friends are junkies. That's not really true. I'm a
From 1969's Let It Bleed, that was, of course, the Rolling Stones with Monkey Man. My guest this week, Tony Harris's wild card choice. Your finale track, then, Tony, is an XTC song, and it's from the Apple Venus album, the Apple Venus Volume 1 album, which was quite a tough album, I think, from the put together. I think it was done under a lot of pressure, financial constraints, issues with a label, etc. But yeah, it's very enjoyable. I'll tell you who it reminded me of, Talk Talk.
Yes, this album sounds a lot like Talk Talk, actually.
It has that very ethereal, fragile atmosphere.
And very symphonic.
Yes.
I mean, he deliberately didn't want to use guitars in this album, which is why Dave Gregory, who is a wonderful guitarist, left during the recording.
Yeah.
It's one of the last things they ever did. I love XTC. Paul and I have a recurring problem because I can't decide which XTC album to cover on Twilight Turntable. I love them all, and Apple Venus one is one of the finest. And Andy, I don't know, have you had much XTC on here before?
Once, back in show 46, the singer-songwriter Vinnie Peculiar, I don't know whether you're familiar with him, he chose Mayor of Simpleton from Oranges and Lemons.
That is an unbelievable song. Andy Partridge is one of the sort of unsung heroes of British music. And they as a band are. And few can write as observantly or as sympathetically or as warmly as he can. And they play brilliant pop records that all have intention and purpose and heart. And for many people, I'll say they're probably the best band you've never properly listened to. You might remember a couple of singles and think that was it, but they were their own worst enemies. They stopped themselves being successful more times than they could ever imagine. But as a body of work, there's particularly from, say, Drums and Wires onwards, is a phenomenal body of work. I chose this song thinking about where we are these days. This is a song about hope for the future. It's urging children not to make the same mistakes that we have. And I think in the world that we currently live, that's not a bad intention to put out musically. So I leave that with you.
The Last Balloon by XTC from the 1999 Apple Venus album, the finale choice of my guest this week, Tony Harris. So, Tony, we've made it to the end. I hope that you enjoyed putting your mix together, even if you had to put aside your normal listening to a full album principles. And I hope you enjoyed coming on.
I absolutely loved it, and I adore your format. I should say that unlike my co-host, I didn't want to mess around too much with mine. I know he agonized over his, and I was able to put markers down on quite a lot of this quite easily. It's a beautiful format. I wish you all the very best success with it. It's been a pleasure to be a guest and pleasure to have you with us. Maybe we'll get you on again. You can come and talk to us about another album.
I have several million other albums I could talk about.
We'd love to have you on. Thank you so much, Steve. It's been terrific talking to you.